There we go. Welcome everybody for
I'm
Bruce.
going to arrive late and leave a little early today, just to FYI.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, okay,
And you
okay.
know what? I know you just heard me saying this, but I will not be here next week because I will be flying to Scotland, going to Findhorn. So,
And I'll be in Colorado.
oh, really?
Yeah, at a School for A Course in Miracles
Oh,
retreat.
that's right. You said you
Yep,
were doing a thing up here.
yep.
Oh my goodness, how sweet that is.
Yeah, it'll be fun. So we'll both be traveling.
Yep, we will. We will. We will. And it's really interesting. I'm assuring you're probably going to see Carol Howe. Um,
I don't know.
Maybe, possibly. You never know.
I don't know if she's planning to be in Colorado Springs for the retreat, but because she hasn't really attended any of the School for A Course
Okay.
in Miracles classes, but I would certainly welcome opportunity to see her if I did. But
That'd be cool. Yeah.
yeah.
But we're reading her book, Never Forget to Laugh,
Oh, it's a great one, isn't
the
it?
Bill
Yeah.
Thetford book
Mm-hmm.
on Tuesdays. So we're getting both sides of it here from
Mm-hmm.
Ken and Bill about what happened in the very beginning. Uh, so, um, so we were just talking about this class that Bill was supposed to teach. It's hard to even remember. It's only been a week, but I'm going to back up just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because I think there's something really important in this section here. Uh, so this is Jesus talking to Bill through Helen. So, and I believe that this was not with any notes. It just directly, honestly, it's like, you sit down next to somebody and they say, "Oh, by the way, I have a message for you from your long dead ex-husband or whatever," and then and then they start speaking, and this is that person speaking through them, sort of a mediumship type thing. But this is Jesus talking to Bill through Helen, which I still just find remarkable. But anyway, so I'm going to go back here. He says, Bill, if you will to be a devoted teacher rather than an egocentric one, you will not be afraid. And he's saying this to all of us. Honestly, every single one of us. If we want to be a devoted teacher rather than an egocentric one, then we won't be afraid. The teaching situation is fearful if it is misused as an ego involvement. If you become afraid, it is because you are using it this way. But the devoted teacher perceives the situation as it is and not as he wills it. He does not see it as dangerous because he is not exploiting it. This is what I think is so cool. I need devoted teachers, for example, Bill, as much as I need devoted priestesses, for example, Helen. They both heal the mind. And that is always my own aim. The soul, the spirit, is far beyond the need of your protection or mine. The biblical quotation should read, "In this world you need not have tribulation because I have overcome the world. That is why you should be of good cheer." So I just love this because Jesus, in many places in the Course, says, just stop trying to do things and let me do it for you. And I will do it for you. And he needs. I love that he uses the word priestesses, um, because that there's many meanings to that for me, but which I won't go into. But he's talking about teachers and priestesses, uh, specifically Bill and Helen, but it is also specifically Bruce and Lynn, that he needs as well. And that's why he's telling us in today's in what is salvation in today's lesson, you know, be what you are,
Mm-hmm.
because what you are is what is real and what God made.
Yeah. And
And
since this
that
is
is what changes the
oh,
world. Go ahead.
It does. I was gonna say, and since this is a purely non-dual course, that A Course in Miracles is based on, pure non-duality, then the teachers that are needed are the willingness for us to accept the atonement for ourselves, because that's really what the Course says in a number of places, that our only responsibility is to accept the atonement for ourselves. And because minds are joined, there's nothing physically that we need to do, but we just automatically reflect and express that change of mind in our involvements in the world. I think it's so easy to think that, we need to, be like Ken and have classes and write books, and we might find ourselves doing some of those things on the level of form, but you can basically be a profoundly effective teacher or priestess or whatever without ever saying a word or scribing anything, just by the way you live your life. And I think that's really the point of the Course, is to have that experience, and then that experience radiates to everyone that we meet or even think about, because
Absolutely.
minds are joined, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is how we do it. And that's what someone in my earlier class was saying, I just don't, I know I'm supposed to do something. I don't know what to do. And I said, There's nothing to do. We're not, we're, there's, there's no, she was thinking about the election. Maybe Jesus wanted her to go out and do something. I said, well, if you feel guided to do something, by all means, follow your guidance. But Jesus is never telling us to do action in the world.
Right, right.
That is not the kind of action that he is asking of us.
Right.
Uh, and
And
but
not asking to not do things in the world. It's totally,
right,
it's new. It's a behavior in a behavior agnostic curriculum, a
exactly,
space-time agnostic curriculum, because it's really reminding us that our real identity is beyond space and time, has nothing to do with specifics, bodies or personalities, or the split mind that seem to have made all that up. And in fact, that's what our class forgiveness classroom consists of, is looking at each of those specifics, starting with our own individuality, and ending it with that, I suppose I could say. And
yeah,
realizing, well, that's what we made up, that's what the cause of our misery. And if I can begin to realize that, well, the moments when I feel the most peace is when I'm um, not thinking along the lines that what's in it for the Bruce figure is the most important, and including all of its attachments and aversions to everything and anything in the world. Right.
right. And anything that you believe will hurt you. It can and will. Anything that you don't believe or think about, uh, you know, because it's based on your own belief in its reality and its power. So,
Mhm.
if I believe, and this is another thing that we were trying to express, is that this thought that somehow this one election is going to make or break or fix or do anything is is again buying into that worldly foolishness, and doesn't mean that you don't, if you feel compelled or feel guided to do something, do it,
Mhm.
but by all means, because that's fighting it is even worse. It's more harmful to you to fight the ego. The thing to do is just say, okay, whatever it is. Um and uh you know so uh, it doesn't really matter what you do in this world, but it definitely matters who you're doing it with.
Right.
So
That's
that's
the huge difference. Yeah. And that's the difference between making a big deal out of who we vote for every couple of years and what thought system we vote for every second.
yes, exactly.
Not that there's anything wrong with voting for political candidates we feel will do a better job in whatever country we're in, but it pales into insignificance when we disregard vastly more important election that we make moment to moment to moment to
Moment to
moment.
moment to moment to moment. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Uh so that's I love this quotation. In this world you need not have tribulation because I have overcome the world. That is
Mhm.
why you should be of good cheer. And he says that also in the course, I believe, I have overcome the world. Those exact words. Um, so
Yeah.
you know, that's that overcome and not fixed.
Hmm.
So, so I'll continue reading then. So Bill's course was very carefully chosen because, quote, abnormal psychology, unquote, is ego psychology. This is precisely the kind of content which should never be taught from the ego, whose abnormality should be lessened by teaching, not increased. You, Bill, are particularly well suited to perceive this difference and can therefore teach this course as it should be taught. Most teachers have an unfortunate tendency to teach the course abnormally, and many of the students are apt to suffer considerable perceptual distortion because of their own authority problems. Uh, I just have to say here, this is Jesus talking directly to Bill through Helen. He's talking about teachers that teach the course abnormally. I mean, he's not talking about A Course in Miracles because there were no teachers teaching the course at that time. There wasn't even a course at this time. This was the beginnings of the course. So what course is he talking about? And of course, he's talking about abnormal psychology, the course that Bill was supposed to be teaching. And uh, so I think he's kind of given Bill a hint on how to approach teaching this course he's supposed to be teaching, and not adding to people's his students' perspectable perceptual distortion because of their own authority problems. This is a really subtle kind of thing, but I think he's really and let's see, Ken says, in using the phrase to teach the course abnormally, uh, Jesus is referring to teachers making the ego's error real, teaching the abnormal psychology of separation through seeing themselves as separate from their students. This then reinforces the students' own belief in the reality of their separation from each other, their professors, and from God. Jesus is thus asking Bill to teach his students differently so that he may learn a different lesson for himself. So that, and basically it is, I'm only teaching myself. So it's how I craft this lesson,
Hmm.
that, I know the content, I know the form. Uh, well, maybe I know the content, but I don't know the form. I don't know how to craft it so that it is teaching me um, what I truly am.
Hmm.
Because that's all the course is to teach you who you are, help you to remember God.
And we remember our Creator when we remove the blocks in our mind that we put there to the awareness of that love, that presence,
Yes,
that eternal
exactly.
innocence and joyous being.
I love it. So Jesus then continues to say to Ken, your teaching assignment, and I assure you it is an assignment, will be to present perceptual distortions without either engaging in them yourself or encouraging your students to do so. This interpretation of your role and theirs is too charitable to induce fear. If you adhere to this role, you will both engender and experience hope, and you will inspire rather than dispirit the future teachers and therapists I'm entrusting to you. I promise to attend myself, and you should at least credit me with some dependability in keeping my own promises. I never make them lightly because I know the need my brothers have for trust. So here again, he's saying, I'll come and sit in your class. I can imagine the professor down there and you know, the auditorium with all the seats and the professor down in the front and looking up in the seats and seeing Jesus up there waving at him. I'm here. I'm here to help you. Um, but you know, this is Jesus talking to Bill and telling him, I'll be there in your class and I'll help you to teach your students how to really do the work that they need to do. Uh,
Mhm.
which
And
I
I
think,
think we've all experienced that when we get ourselves out of the way and just let spirit, flow through us, and rather than trying to, make it about ourselves, our little s selves. Um, and that's when we really feel truly peaceful, is when and that's and experience the kinship and the true interconnectedness, relatedness, and sameness, and ultimately oneness that we have with everyone.
yeah, yes, exactly. And when you feel that, when you recognize it, it is in uplifting. It's such trip.
Hmm.
Oh my God,
It's the real deal.
it's the real thing.
Should I read on from here?
Yes.
Okay. There seemed to be a pause in the dictation at this point, which ended the discussion of Bill's class. And then the big heading here is more specific teachings. We're still in chapter 9. And for those who might have just joined us, we're reading Absence from Felicity, the story of Helen Schuckman and her scribing of A Course in Miracles by Kenneth Wapnick, PhD. And we are just turn the page on to page 280 in the print version that I have. And it looks like we're 271 to 492, about 54% of the digital version you're looking at and sharing on your screen. Thanks. So more specific teachings begins with, we are now in a new section, and then in parentheses text page 51, and then in the that's in the version I have. It's actually chapter 4, section 2, paragraph 1, and looks like 4 of the sentences there. And Jesus begins by commenting on a question asked by Bill, the same question asked at one time or another by almost every student of A Course in Miracles. And here's the proverbial "how did the impossible occur" question. I can hear it coming. Bill has asked lately how the mind could ever have made the ego. There it is. This is a perfectly reasonable question. In fact, it is the best question either of you could ask. There is no point in giving an historical answer because the past does not matter in human terms. And the footnote for that says, in other words, the past only seems to have an effect on people's lives. And history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present. And that's something I think is also emphasized over and over in the course, is that, why are we asking about historical stuff and getting hung up on past, you know, sages, masters, tyrants, what all the interesting historical stuff that can be a real distraction if we forget to apply what we're learning to our own lives in the present, right? So Bill has often told you, in brackets, Helen, that your thinking is too abstract at times, and he is right. Abstraction does not apply to knowledge because knowledge is completely impersonal and examples are irrelevant to its understanding. Perception, however, is always specific and therefore quite concrete. Your own, and in brackets, Helen, again, present state is the best concrete example Bill could have of how the mind could have made the ego. You do have real knowledge at times, but when you throw it away, it is as if you never had it. And I think we can all relate to that too. It's like when we're sane, it's clear as the light of the midday sun on a cloudless day. And when we're, you know, indulging in an ego tantrum or escapade of one sort or another, it's like, you know, there's no there's no order of insanity to the ego because it's always 100% insane, just as the Holy Spirit is 100% sane. Right? Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah. And this is really cool how he's explaining this, because I
mhm,
think this is something that w- we have to we have to focus on.
mhm. Oh, absolutely. It's that gentle vigilance, the persistent, patient, kind, gentle vigilance of just looking at our mind and not condemning ourselves when we find ourselves going into ego's dark abyss of sin, guilt, fear, denial, repression, projection, and all that craziness, and just say, wow, I must have been afraid of the love that's behind that um, resistance.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's not bad. It's just not evil, sinful, or wicked. It's just silly. I, I know I keep using that phrase over and over, but I think it's one of my go-to, almost a mantra of, if I can just remember that the unconscious, almost completely unconscious condemnation that we do to ourselves is just the needless suffering. That if we just looked at the ego shenanigans without condemning ourselves and berating ourselves for, um, really just being afraid of returning to the love that we never left, um, that's actually the fast track. That is the shortcut if there was such a thing, which really isn't. Yeah. But that gets us back to peace more quickly than all the foot dragging and really it's the condemning ourselves for our foot dragging that is the probably the bigger problem with it. The little problem is that we are afraid. The bigger problem is that we condemn ourselves for our fears.
Yeah, and dragging your foot. You remind me of someone who's uh like chained to a post and just keep going around and around and around
Well,
in circles.
yeah, we're sort of chained to our identity, it would seem,
Yeah.
and but we found the lock and we padlocked ourselves in and we so can't really complain too much about that, right?
No, and we can't blame anybody else for it either. And I think that's what people just like, I didn't do this. I could not have done this. Well, surprise, you're doing it now. And that's what he's saying right here. Don't think, how could I have done this? I'm doing it right now
Hmm.
by making the world real.
Yeah.
And as Jesus says, if it can occur that way in the past, why should he be surprised that it occurred that way in the past? It's always you know, every single thing we see and do is a reflection of that one crazy decision to, think that we could separate from our source.
Hmm.
That's it.
And we keep making the silly decision over and over again until we realize, wait a minute, this is not getting me anywhere. I'm idling, as the course would say. It's like we have the transmission in neutral on our vehicle of our mind, and we're not really doing anything, and we're not really going anywhere. We have the incredible special effects department in our holographic 3D high-res movie productions facility we call the projecting mind, but it's really, it's not. No real um, beings were harmed in the making of the movie, and no real mileage was
Yeah,
logged in
nothing,
the travels of our seeming misadventures. Or,
it never occurred.
Mhm.
All right, so you want to continue reading?
Sure. Let's see. Where did I leave off? I think I was at. Let me just start that paragraph again.
Yeah,
Your
start.
own bracket Helen unbracket. uh, present state is the best concrete example Bill could have of how the mind could have made the ego. You do have real knowledge at times, but when you throw it away, it is as if you never had it. Exactly. This willfulness is so apparent that Bill need only perceive it to see that it does happen. If it can occur that way in the present, why should he be surprised that it occurred that way in the past? All psychology rests on the principle of continuity of behavior. Surprise is a reasonable response to the unfamiliar, but hardly to something that has occurred with such persistence. I think that kind of ties into to let me see if I can find it real quick. That very humorous quote that oh, so how does it go? Something like, you're, you know, I don't think addicted is the right word, but it's that you're so uh well, so basically habituated, or that isn't it the word either, but we basically like misery. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the footnote for that one is, for further discussion of this issue with an answer given on a different level, see the manual, page 7377. And your footnote probably will say which sections in the manual, which anyway.
Let's see. Let's check the footnote. Um, oh, it's in the clarification of
Is it
terms.
the
Uh,
introduction? Yeah, 4 and then 2. Okay. Okay.
so if you want to look that up,
Yeah, sure.
I'm giving you an assignment.
Okay.
Did you want to see that again? Or I always forget these.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. And
Okay,
then
very good.
and then
Thank you.
2 is the ego miracle. Okay. There we go. Okay. So
Okay,
do you want to pick up from there?
okay, sure. So, and let's just read. Okay, so this thing out of the way. Jesus then shifts to comparing and contrasting Helen and Bill again. This is a typical discussion during this phase of the scribing, where Jesus presents Helen and Bill as examples of the dynamics of the ego thought system he is teaching them. He also makes reference to Helen's eyesight, a discussion which will become even more meaningful for us in part 3, when I discuss how Helen's visual problems symbolize her defense against Jesus and his message in the Course. And then this, I guess, is Jesus again. An extreme example is a good teaching aid, not because it is typical, but because it is clear. The more complex the material, the clearer the example should be for teaching purposes. And then in parens, he says, Bill, remember that for your own course, and do not avoid the dramatic. It holds the student's interest precisely because it is so apparent that it can be readily perceived. End of parens. And I just wanted to say, we just read about this in the psychotherapy pamphlet, where it says that you basically that if we didn't have the experience of living in the world in a body as a human, it doesn't say this exactly, but if we didn't have this experience, then we would not be able to talk to other people who were having the experience with any sort of authority or conviction, because they need someone who's already knows their situation. They don't need someone who has never experienced uh the fear or the upset of whatever situation they happen to be in. So
They need, we all need someone that we can relate to. And I think that's why, well, the current political
yes,
situation, a candidate that represents an ethnicity and or gender and or whatever. A lot of times people think that that's really important, and on a level form it may be, but I think where we get to a place of generalizations, we realize, well, we're all on the same boat. It's just one big uh, one big enormous identity that we all share, that's infinite. And if we can remember that, then we can afford to relate to everyone as equals, which is what the Course tries to remind us, is that he says, all my siblings are special, basically.
yes,
And that puts the
exactly.
kibosh on the specialness. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And uh the fact is that he picked us just because of our specific, what we knew, where we went, who we knew, whatever, so that we could relate. It's almost like, did you ever read any my God, what is his name, John, he wrote The World According to Garb. Why can't I think of his last name? Anyway, he wrote a book called A Prayer for Owen Meany. And it's kind of a long, story about this kid who was uh, a small person, a little person, and goes through all of everything in his life, and in the end, or the spoiler alert here, that he's there's a busload of children who like plunge into a river or some body of water, and he was able to go down and save these children because he seemed like a child himself, and so they trusted him and let him lead them or guide them or get them out of there. And in the meantime, I think he expired because of it. He passed away. But the whole idea was that because he was a small person, he was able to save many children. um, and that's kind of what Jesus is, I think, is saying here. Because you can relate to them, you're going to be able to help them understand what it is that they need to know. Whereas if you were just coming to them as a professor, and you're just standing up spouting, lectures to them, and they don't experience the compassionate being that you are, the loving character that you are, whatever it was that Bill was able to express. If they need that from their teacher to show them how to be. And that's us, Course in Miracles teachers. People need us to be the loving, calm, peaceful examples of a proof of how this course works. If we're being sitting up, on a platform, spouting out to people how to behave, and we ourselves are not behaving in that way, then we can't really teach what it is that people need to learn. We're going to be teaching them amiss, awry. And so, and we don't want to do that. We want to teach them. We want to be examples of Christ, and so that's, I think, what Jesus is emphasizing to us so much. Uh, so let me see. Uh, this chat out of the way. An extreme example is a good teaching aid, not because it is typical, but because it is clear. The more complex the material, the clearer the example should be for teaching purposes. And then, Bill, remember that for your own course, and do not avoid the dramatic. It holds the student's interest precisely because it is so apparent that it can be readily perceived. Jesus wants us to, he doesn't want us to be dry and and pedantic. He wants us to actually entertain with our love, not and keep people's interests. People are not going to be interested if we're not interesting. So, but as we have said before, all teaching devices in the hands of good teachers are aimed at rendering themselves unnecessary. Therefore, the whole thing of put down this course, put down this world, rendering itself unnecessary. I would therefore like to use your, in brackets, Helen's, present state as an example of how the mind can work, provided you both fully recognize that it need not work that way. I never forget this myself, and a good teacher shares his own ideas in which he himself believes. Otherwise, he cannot really profess them, as we used the term before. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. And so you want to continue reading? I kind of took over.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah. And I was flashing back to when I did a brief stint consulting for the Air Force, but my dad was in the Air Force and was an instructor pilot and all that kind of stuff. But I'd never been in the military. So when I was consulting for, an Air Force base for about a decade ago for a few months, it was, at one point the lieutenant colonel said, called me in his office, said, everything you're doing is great, except, the men and women on the base here, really need someone that has Air Force experience, which you don't have. And so, we're going to have to get someone else. And I understood completely, and it was a very fun, I wouldn't say it was fun, but it was very interesting and very enlightening experience. And I'm very grateful for it because I think my compassion deepened tremendously for, men and women in uniform. And anyway, but that was one of those examples of, we all need something that we can relate to. And I think the beauty of the course is that what Jesus shares in the course, which is really our right mind, is the idea that we can all relate to is that we're all, we all think we've abandoned our home and don't know how to get back. And his curriculum is basically, here's how you get back, and reminding us that there's a light at the end of the tunnel that we never left. So,
Yeah,
so that's the motivation, and and it's also again the example that he said, I did this, you can too. There's nothing that I achieved that you can't achieve and will achieve. And
exactly.
even the Bible gets that right, and a place or two. Yeah,
Yep. And it's like Ariadne's thread. That we're wandering through the
in the
labyrinth,
labyrinth. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but we have this thread that is holding us
Hmm.
and will always guide us back. I always
Yep,
think about
yep.
that when I read What is Salvation, because that's exactly basically what it says, a guarantee that you'll return, and no
Hmm.
matter what you what you think. So
There's a wonderful Ken Wapnick audio, probably a video too, but I've listened to the audio a few times. It's the golden thread of hope that uses the Minotaur and the labyrinth and Ariadne, and as a metaphor for how the ego's dark thread leads us into more and more, depths of despair and division and conflict, further into the labyrinth of the cave. And but this is the same thread. We just are, instead of hand over hand going deeper into the darkness, if we listen to Holy Spirit, we use the exact same thread, meaning every specific thing that seems to be happening in our life then becomes the perfect classroom rather than the perfect prison, to lead us out of the darkness. And I thought that was such a great metaphor. And he elaborates on that in this golden thread of hope audio. If you haven't
all
heard it,
right.
I highly recommend it. Yeah.
I think I might have it, but yeah, so you want to continue reading?
Sure, sure. With full recognition of its transitory nature, and in parentheses, a recognition which I hope you both share, Helen offers a very good teaching example of alternations between spirit, soul, in brackets, spirit, and ego, with concomitant variations between peace and frenzy. In answer to Bill's question, it is perfectly apparent that when she is ego dominated, she does not know her soul. Her abstract ability, which is perfectly genuine and does stem from knowledge, cannot help her because she has turned to the concrete, which she cannot handle abstractly. Being incapable of appropriate concreteness perceptually, because her ego is not her natural home, she suffers from its intrusions, but not from complete lack of knowledge. And I think Ken reflects that in his commentary on Helen and other programs that he's done. And he says that, when Helen was channeling the course, especially after the first 5 chapters, where it was kind of getting the warm up and, cleaning the rusty water out of the pipes from like a house that's been abandoned for a long time. Um, you know, she was incredibly clear, and even in those early chapters of the text, the material that came through is just astounding, and the clarity and the brilliance of what came through Helen is just amazing. But then Ken would say that when Helen was trying to do things in the world, she used Jesus as her higher shopping service, and that was basically just enough really to convince her that it was trusting that part of her mind that was important, and not the specific outcome. And at one point she realized that she didn't need that anymore, and she said, okay, I'm done, or something like that. But I think what Ken's comment was that whenever she tried to give specific advice on the level of form, that she was just as unreliable as and unclear and oftentimes off the mark completely as anyone else that might be trying to do that. So I think that's a good reminder for all of us. Again, as we've been reading this book, it's like Helen's example is such a great classroom example for all of us, and how we can look at the two sides of our mind, the two thought systems. Yep. Meanwhile, let's see. Yeah, okay, I think I finished that paragraph, right?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay. The result is a kind of, quote, double vision, unquote, which would have produced an actual diplopia, and that's footnote is an eye disorder wherein objects are seen twice. Uh, and I'll put my little side footnote in there, is completing the four book, what would be a quadrilogy of the the Fab Four of the course, is there's Bill's biography that you're reading, that Carol Howe wrote. I never forget to laugh. The one we're reading right now about Helen, Absence from Felicity, that Ken wrote. Another autobiography that Ken wrote about himself. Um, and it's what's the title of it? I've been slowly but surely reading it for a while. It's a Symphony of Love, and that you can get that in PDF form, about Ken's life. And then the last of the bunch is Judy Skutch Whitson and her daughter Tam Morgan co-wrote a biography, autobiography. I guess it's a dual autobiography. I guess that's what you call it, called Double Vision, and it's a fun read, and lots of familiar names for people who've studied metaphysics for a long time, and parapsychology, and that sort of thing, since that was Judy's background before the course arrived in her lap. Um, and also, just it's not only it's a fun read, but it's also insightful as well about you know that everything that we're all going through. That it's that process of going from the personal to the transpersonal, isn't it?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And I do have that book, Double Vision. Um, and I haven't read it yet. I don't think I'm going to take it. I might take it on the plane with me. I don't know.
That'd be a good plain read. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of small print, mine is. So,
But you'll have to read it with a brogue to warm up, right?
oh my goodness, I am not going to even embarrass myself doing that. Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
But silently with the brogue, right?
Yeah, I read all
That-
these things. What not to say, what not to do when you and the first thing is my ancestors came from here and my just I mean that it's hilarious
yeah.
because yes, people
I,
treat you. I'd do it.
yeah, I think I've got the perfect name for not having to say that, right? To go to Scotland. Or a particularly good name anyway. Okay,
Particularly the name for that.
I'll
Yes.
start that paragraph over.
Okay.
The result is a kind of, quote, double vision, unquote, which would have produced an actual diplopia if she had not settled for nearsightedness. This was an attempt to see the concrete more clearly through the ego's eyes without the, quote, interference, unquote, of the longer range. Her virtual lack of astigmatism is due to her real efforts at objectivity and fairness. She has not attained them, or she would not be nearsighted. But she has tried to be fair with what she permitted herself to see. Well, that's interesting. The last discussion relates to Helen's physical vision to her inner vision, wherein the interferences her mind introduced are reflected by her visual interferences. Her nearsightedness thus represents a compromise attempt to see things clearly and fairly, yet without the benefit of the, quote, long range, unquote, or spiritual perspective that would come from her inner wisdom. Jesus then continues to develop the analogy between inner and outer perception as he contrasts Helen and Bill's vision. Mhm. Shall I go on from there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll read the
Okay.
next couple of paragraphs. Belief that there is another way is the loftiest idea of which ego thinking is capable. I think that comes from the Course or something very close to it. This is because it contains a hint of recognition that the ego is not a self. Helen always had this idea, but it merely confused her. Bill, you were more capable of a long-range view, and that is why your eyesight is good. But you were willing to see because you utilized judgment against what you saw. This gave you clearer perception than Helen's, but cut off the negative, excuse me, cut off the cognitive level, i.e., the level of knowledge or God more deeply. That is why you believe that you never had knowledge. Repression has been a stronger mechanism in your own ego defense, and that is why you find her shift so hard to tolerate. Willfulness is more characteristic of her, and that is why she has less sense than you do. It is extremely fortunate temporarily that the particular strengths you will both ultimately develop and use are precisely those which the other must supply now. You, in brackets, Bill, who will be the strength of God, are quite weak, and you, in brackets, Helen, who will be God's help, are clearly in need of help yourself. What better plan could have been devised to present the intrusion of the ego's arrogance on the outcome? I think what jumps out at me is that how, we all seem to have things, qualities, attributes, talents, skills, abilities, that others, you know, lack, and vice versa. Um, and yet, when we appreciate what we experience from others, rather than being jealous or envious or otherwise, use that as an ego um, sabotage for our peace by defining that as a and misinterpreting that as a lack. Then we have the shared interest rather than the separate interest, and then we benefit from everyone's um, excelling in their particular fields and areas of creativity and expertise rather than feeling deprived of it, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think, it's just so um beautiful that, Jesus is first off, this is so funny. It's just humorous when I read it. Um, but he's really trying to explain to them why they're doing what they're doing and how they're doing it.
Hmm.
And I did want to say something about this idea because I think a lot of folks might read this, and I think I in the past might have read this and said, "Oh, the reason I'm having so much trouble with my vision is because I don't want to see." I don't want to, and it could very well be. Um, but I don't see that, this is not God's plan that you have trouble with your vision. It's your own plan that you made to remind you of what it is uh, that you're doing, rather than, I just, I don't like this idea, and so maybe I'm objecting too much, but I don't like this idea that uh, the reason that that I have a problem is because I'm not willing to see. My goodness, I'll just uh, someone really wants to talk to me. Um, but for Jesus is basically psychoanalyzing them, is what I see.
Yeah, and of course, one thought that might be helpful, and this is just a guess on my part, is since this is I'm assuming kind of early in the scribing and or even maybe before, um, you know, as Ken pointed out, oftentimes when Helen tried to get specific, she could be, you know, using her own very limited ideas, and this might have come through in the writing somewhat, even though it may have been true for them. I think it's also another factor that it's that who's the matter with me? Was it Louis Hay that wrote that? I think
Yes.
that that whole thing of it's really kind of it could um, be a detour and get us into a level of confusion thinking mode of thinking, well, I need to look at all the physical situations, and bodily abilities and disabilities and relate those to psychological equivalents. And I don't think the course really wants us to go down that rabbit hole. But if we find something useful, it says, well, if there's something that's in the realm of magic that you find helpful, use it and don't make a big deal out of it. But do it and get on with it. But the idea is to get back to the vigilance for the ego or the Holy Spirit and make that our primary task rather than getting, bogged down in the details of form.
Yes, yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And to just be, because I had, I don't have to say I've been since I was a small child. The doctors, told me when my parents when I was like 7 that eventually I would be completely blind. And I've fought with that for my entire life, having I've had on my right eye, oh gosh, no, no. On my left eye, I've had at least, let's see, one, two, three, four, like 6 surgeries on my left eye, and at least 12 or more on my right eye, trying to trying to fix things. Of course, my right eye is completely blind now, so they're just no fixing of it anymore. Um, and of course I only have one eye now, and it is pretty fragile. So the idea of blindness is such a big thing to me. And when, of course, when this all happened to me was when I was first, I mean, when the actual blindness came about was when I was first studying A Course in Miracles, and all those early lessons about I am determined to see. uh
Yeah,
it was
it could
like
be certainly a mechanism for beating yourself up, huh? I was thinking if you're a biblical literalist, you could say, wow, how successful you are. You let your eye be single, It's like, no, well, that's
exactly.
not exactly the idea that was in mind.
No, but it's true, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't want to go into like all the things that I've seen about this whole blindness thing, but and it's 25 after. I know you have to leave a little bit early.
Yeah, I need to sign off in a moment or two.
But looking at this whole idea of seeing, I realized that the brain, we have two brains, left brain, right brain. They're motivated by the opposite side. So my left brain is motivated by my right, and it's my right eye. Basically, um, so losing my right eye, it basically means that um, I'm all the information or whatever is going to my right brain, and I like to say my right mind. So losing an eye made me more right-minded. Anyway, that's probably too complex to make a joke about on a Saturday morning, but
Yeah, well, we'll all get the vision that we thought we had left ultimately, and it will make our optical apparatus and capabilities irrelevant at some point. But meanwhile, just be kind to ourselves, right? So,
that's right. That's
yep.
right.
Right.
Just
Well,
yeah,
I'm
and
gonna sign off now, and wish you a wonderful couple of weeks, and look forward to resuming our conversation then.
yes, thank you so much, Bruce. And
Thank you.
yeah, it'll be like 2 weeks because I won't be back. I'll be back on the 7th.
Okay.
Not sure. I think that may be a Friday, so I might be.
Okay. Well, we'll play by ear. Yeah. All
So
good. Yeah. All righty. Thanks a lot. Have a
very good.
great trip, Lynn.
Thank you, Bruce. I love you,
But
brother.
likewise. Bye for
All
now.
right. All right. Bye-bye.